The heart monitor flatlined. The room went silent. Everyone looked too. Dr. Hale. He hesitated. But she didn't. She moved through the chaos like she had done this 1,000 times. Because she had no one at St. Mercy? Hospital knew who Sarah Kane really was. They were about to find out, and none of them were ready. St. Mercy. Hospitals smelled the same every morning. Antiseptic. Bleach. The faint bitterness of old coffee from the break. Room down the hall, Sarah Kane walked. Through it all, without flinching, she wore plain blue scrubs. Her badge read Nurse General Ward. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. No makeup. No jewelry. Nothing that would make anyone look twice. That was exactly the point. She had worked at St. Mercy for 14 months. 14 quiet months. She checked vitals. She changed bandages. She smiled at patients and stayed out of the way of the doctors who believed the world revolved around their white coats. Dr. Marcus. Hale was the worst of them. He was the head of the emergency department, tall, loud. The kind of man who announced his own brilliance before anyone asked. He had a habit of snapping at nurses in front of patients, of rolling his eyes when they spoke, of making it very clear that, in his ward, they were nothing more than hired hands. Sarah never argued with him. She never raised her voice. She never fought back. She just nodded, did her work, and moved on. Her coworkers pitied her. "You just let him talk to you like that?" asked Diane, a nurse on the night shift. One evening, as they restocked the supply closet, Diane was kind, honest, the type of woman who wore her heart on her sleeve. Sarah glanced at her and smiled. A small, calm smile. "It doesn't matter," she said, and she meant it. Because Sarah Kane had learned long ago that the people who need to be loud are the ones who are afraid. The people who truly hold power? They are the quietest ones in the room. She knew this better than most. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Sarah arrived at 6. She checked on her patients. Room 4, room 7, room 11. An elderly man recovering from hip surgery. A teenage boy with a broken collarbone. A woman in her 50s fighting pneumonia. She knew every name, every story, every fear. That was her gift. Not just medicine, understanding. By 8 o'clock, the emergency bay began to fill. A car accident had brought in 2 victims from the highway. Stretchers rolled past. Paramedics shouted over the noise. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered above. Sarah watched it all from the corridor. Her eyes moved quickly, quietly, taking in every detail. The way the first stretcher was angled wrong. The way the second patient's oxygen mask was loose. The way Dr. Hale was already barking orders without having looked at a single chart. She moved. She corrected. She fixed. She did it all so fast, so smoothly, that no one even noticed. No one ever did. And somewhere, deep inside the calm and steady chest of Sarah Kane, something stirred. A feeling she had spent 14 months trying to bury. The feeling that this life, this quiet, invisible life, was never going to last. The man arrived at 9:47. In the morning, he came in on a stretcher carried by 2 paramedics who looked pale. Not from the cold. From fear. Sarah noticed it immediately. The way their hands trembled as they moved him through the double doors. The way neither of them made eye contact with anyone. The way one of them whispered something to the other and then looked over his shoulder, as if checking to see if something had followed them inside. The patient was a man in his mid-40s. He wore tactical gear. Not a costume. Not a uniform from any local department Sarah recognized. This was real. Black, reinforced, stripped of any insignia. The kind of gear that was not meant to be seen outside of classified operations. A tourniquet was wrapped tight around his left leg. Blood soaked through the bandage in a dark, spreading stain. His face was gray. His eyes were closed. But his breathing was steady, controlled. Even now, bleeding out on a hospital stretcher, something in this man was holding on. Sarah stepped forward. "What happened?" she asked. The paramedic hesitated. His jaw tightened. he said. "We found him on the side of Route 9. No ID, no radio, nothing." Dr. Hale pushed past Sarah without a word. "Get him into Bay 3, he ordered, his voice carrying across the room like it always did, commanding, certain. The voice of a man who had never once questioned his own authority. Sarah followed. She stayed close, but she said nothing. She watched the team transfer the man onto the bed. Someone cut open the tactical vest to expose his chest. Sarah saw it then. 3 things that changed everything. First, a scar, long and precise, running from just below his left collarbone to the middle of his chest. It was old, surgically healed, but not by any hospital. Second, a small tattoo on the inside of his right wrist. 2 letters and a number. Nothing that would mean anything to anyone in that room, but it meant everything to Sarah. She felt her blood go cold. Third, his eyes opened. They were sharp, alert, focused in a way that no man losing blood this fast should have been able to manage. His gaze moved across the room with practiced precision. Cataloging exits, counting people, reading the space like a map. Military, federal, something else entirely. And then his eyes found Sarah. They locked onto her face. Something flickered behind them, recognition, or maybe confusion. Like a man trying to remember a dream he had already forgotten, his cracked lips moved. The room was loud, machines beeping, voices overlapping, Dr. Hale shouting for a second IV line. But Sarah heard him. 2 words, quiet, rough, almost inaudible. "You were never supposed to see me." A chill ran through her. Not from fear, from something older, something buried. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she looked away. Her face revealed nothing. Her hands did not shake. Her breathing did not change. She turned and moved to the supply cart, reaching for a fresh set of gauze as if nothing had happened. But inside, something had cracked open. Something she had spent a very long time keeping sealed. The next 2 hours moved like any other shift, or they were supposed to. Sarah worked in silence. She checked for lines. She monitored the tactical man's vitals from the doorway of Bay 3. Dr. Hale had taken personal charge of the case, which meant he spent most of his time standing over the patient, arms crossed, telling every nurse in earshot how rare and complicated the injury was. It wasn't that rare. Sarah knew that. The femoral bleed was serious. Yes, but the technique to stabilize it was textbook. She had performed it herself, twice, under worse conditions than this. She said nothing. At 11:15, the man woke again. This time his eyes went straight to Sarah. No searching. No scanning the room. Just her. Like he already knew exactly where she was standing. She met his gaze. Steady, calm. He spoke again. Louder this time, but only loud enough for her. "Call it in," he said. Sarah did not blink. She did not nod. She simply turned and walked toward the break room at the end of the hall. Her footsteps quiet and even on the linoleum floor. Inside, she closed the door. The room was empty. A single window let in gray afternoon light. She pulled out her phone. Not the one she used every day. The other one. The one she kept in the inside pocket of her jacket. The one she had not turned on in 6 months. She powered it on. The screen glowed. 1 contact. No name. Just a code. She typed 3 words and sent the message. Then she powered the phone off again, slipped it back into her pocket, and returned to the ward as if she had simply gone to pour herself a cup of coffee. No one noticed she had been gone. At 12:40, the first black SUV pulled up outside. Sarah saw it from the hallway window. Then a second one. Then a third. They parked in a tight formation across the front entrance of St. Mercy, engines still running. The glass reflected their dark shapes like a mirror reflecting something it did not understand. Men stepped out. Not police. Not ambulance. They wore dark jackets with no visible markings. They moved with a calm, a deliberate speed that Sarah recognized immediately. Professional, trained, Purposeful. Dr. Hale saw the SUVs from the lobby. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, his confidence cracking for the first time all day. A hospital administrator appeared at his side. Phone pressed to her ear, face white. "They say they're here for the patient in Bay 3, she said. Her voice was thin. "They said we need to stop all treatment. Now." Dr. Hale's jaw tightened. He straightened his coat. "Nobody tells me how to run my emergency department," he said, and walked toward the front doors. Sarah watched him go. She did not follow instead. She turned and walked back toward Bay 3. The tactical man was still awake. His breathing had steadied. The bleeding had stopped. He looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not gratitude. Not fear. Something closer to relief. "They're here," he said. Sarah nodded once. "I know," she said, and for the first time in 14 months. Her voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with nursing. Dr. Hale made it 3 steps past the lobby before the doors sealed behind him. Not locked, sealed. A quiet, mechanical hiss that most people would not have noticed. But Hale noticed. He stopped, turned, pushed against the glass. It did not move. One of the men in the dark jacket stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not flash a badge. He simply stood in front of Hale, shoulders squared, and said one sentence. "Please return to the interior of the building." Hale's face went red. He opened his mouth to argue. "Do you know who I am?" He started. The man did not answer. He did not need to. His silence was its own kind of authority, the kind that did not negotiate. Hallie looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back inside, his shoes loud against the tile. Within 20 minutes, St. Mercy Hospital was completely surrounded. Black vehicles lined both sides of the street. Men in tactical positions flanked every entrance. A woman in a gray coat stood near the ambulance bay, speaking rapidly into a satellite phone, her breath visible in the cold air. Inside, the staff had begun to notice nurses clustered in doorways, whispering. Patients in the general ward pressed their faces to the windows. A security guard at the front desk looked like he might be sick. Diane found Sarah in the corridor outside Bay 3. "Sarah," she said, grabbing her arm. Her eyes were wide. "What is happening?" "They won't let anyone in or out. They won't tell us anything." Sarah looked at her. The same calm expression she always wore. The same steady eyes. "Stay with your patients," Sarah said. "Make sure everyone is comfortable. That's all you need to do right now." Diane stared at her. "Are you not scared?" Sarah paused. "No," she said, and she meant it. She turned and walked back into Bay 3. The tactical man was sitting up now. Someone had removed his vest completely. His chest was bare, and the scars on his skin told a story that no hospital chart ever could. Dozens of them, small and large. Some from blades, some from things much worse. He watched Sarah enter the room. "You're going to want to move me," he said. His voice was stronger now, steadier. "I know," she said. "And they're going to want to talk to you." Sarah said nothing to that. She moved to his bedside and checked the 4-line with practiced hands. She adjusted the drip rate by 2 clicks. Precise, automatic. The kind of muscle memory that does not come from nursing. The man watched her hands. "You're good at hiding," he said. Quietly, Sarah glanced at him. Something passed between them. A shared understanding. The kind that only exists between people who have lived in the same shadows. "I had a reason to hide," she said. The man nodded slowly, as if this answered a question he had been carrying for a long time. Outside, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway, getting closer. More of them now. Moving with coordination, the door to Bay 3 opened. A woman in the gray coat stepped inside. Behind her, 2 men in black. She looked at the patient first, then at Sarah. Her expression did not change. "We need to speak with her," the woman said. She was not asking. The man on the bed held Sarah's gaze one last time. "It's time," he said. Sarah straightened. She smoothed her scrubs. She pulled her badge from her chest and held it in her hand for a moment. Looking at it, nurse, general ward. Then she set it down on the bedside table, and she followed the woman out. They brought her to the administrative wing, a small conference room at the end of the hall, the kind of room that was used for budget meetings and scheduling disputes. Beige walls, a plastic table, 2 chairs that felt very small now. The woman in the gray coat stood by the window. She did not sit. Her name, Sarah would later learn, was Agent Caldwell. But right now, she was simply a presence, controlled, watchful. "The operative in Bay 3 is one of ours," Caldwell said. No preamble. No pleasantries. Sarah stood near the door. Her hands were at her sides. Her posture had shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. But her shoulders were straighter now, her chin slightly higher, the way a soldier stands, even when wearing scrubs. "I assumed so," Sarah said. Caldwell studied her for a moment. His vitals stabilized faster than they should have. Whoever adjusted his treatment knew exactly what they were doing. She paused. "That wasn't Dr. Hale." Sarah said nothing. "We traced the signal from the message you sent," Caldwell continued. Her tone was flat, professional. It matched a dormant channel, one that hasn't been active in 4 years. The room was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. "You know what that channel is?" Caldwell said. It was not a question. Sarah held her gaze. "Yes," she said. Caldwell reached into the pocket of her coat. She pulled out a single photograph and placed it on the table between them. It was old, grainy, taken at a distance, in what looked like a briefing room, somewhere cold and gray. Military official. In the center of the photograph, a younger woman stood before a room full of senior officers. Her hair was short. Her uniform was pressed. On her chest, a row of ribbons that most people in that room would never earn in a lifetime. It was Sarah Caldwell. Tapped the photograph once. "We need to know why." "You went dark," she said. Sarah looked at the photo for a long time. The woman in it felt like someone else. Someone from another life. Another version of herself that she had carefully, deliberately, folded away and stored in a place no one could reach. "I had my reasons," Sarah said. "Those reasons put a classified operative in danger today?" "No," Sarah said, and for the first time her voice carried an edge. Quiet, firm, the edge of someone who is used to being obeyed. "My reasons kept him alive. If I hadn't been here, he would have bled out on that stretcher before anyone in this hospital understood what was happening to him." Caldwell did not respond immediately. She studied Sarah, with an expression that might have been respect. Then her phone buzzed. She answered it, listened, said nothing. Hung up, she looked at Sarah. "They want to see you," she said. Caldwell almost smiled. Almost. Someone you haven't seen in a very long time. Sarah's expression did not change. But something moved behind her eyes. Something deep and guarded and old. She nodded once. "Then let's not keep them waiting." Caldwell opened the door. The hallway beyond was no longer empty. More men. More jackets. The air itself felt heavier now, charged with the kind of quiet tension that fills a room before something irreversible happens. Sarah stepped out. And for the first time since she had walked into St. Mercy Hospital 14 months ago, she did not look like a nurse. She looked like exactly who she was. They brought her back to the main corridor, the one that ran the full length of the emergency wing. The one where, just hours ago, she had checked 4 lines and smiled at patients and let Dr. Hale talk past her like she was. Furniture. The corridor was not empty now. Staff lined the walls, nurses, doctors, administrators. Diane was there. Near the supply closet, her hands pressed over her mouth. The security guard stood rigid near the exit. Even Dr. Hale was there, arms crossed, his face flushed, his confidence visibly shaken by the morning's events. At the far end of the hallway, near the lobby doors, stood a man. He was older, tall, silver-haired. His uniform was pressed without a single crease. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulder boards, A general. United States Army. The kind of man whose name appeared in briefings that most people in this building had never seen and never would. General David Marsh. He had arrived quietly. No announcement. No fanfare. Just the sound of measured footsteps and the subtle shift in the air that comes when real authority enters a room. Sarah walked toward him. The corridor was silent. Not a single phone buzzed. Not a single voice broke the stillness. Every person in that hallway was watching, holding their breath without knowing why. Sarah stopped in front of General Marsh. For one long, suspended moment. Nothing happened. Then General Marsh did something that no one in St. Mercy Hospital had ever seen a man of his rank do. He straightened his spine. He lifted his right hand, and he saluted. A full, formal military salute, crisp, deliberate. His eyes locked on Sarah's with a look of unmistakable respect. "Colonel Kane," he said. His voice filled the corridor, clear, steady, carrying the weight of everything that name meant. "Colonel," the word hung in the air like a blade. Sarah returned the salute, precise, without hesitation. The motion was automatic, carved into her body by years of training that no amount of quiet, shifts in a hospital ward could ever erase. "General," she said, and that was all she said. But it was enough. The silence that followed was the loudest thing St. Mercy Hospital had ever heard. Dr. Hale's arms dropped to his sides. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No words came. For the first time in his career, he had nothing to say. The man who had snapped at this woman every single day for 14 months, the man who had looked through her like she was invisible, now stood less than 20 feet from the truth of who she was, and he could not speak. Diane's hands fell away from her mouth. Her eyes were wide and wet. She looked at Sarah, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the very first time. The tactical man in Bay 3, who had been watching through the open door from his bed, said nothing. He simply nodded. Once, slowly, he had known. General Marsh turned slightly, addressing the corridor without raising his voice. "Colonel Kane has been operating under deep cover for the duration of a classified federal operation. Her presence here was sanctioned at the highest level. Everything she has done in this facility has been in direct service to national security." He paused. "You will extend her the same respect you would extend any officer of the United States military." No one moved. No one breathed. General Marsh turned back to Sarah. "Your cover's been compromised, Colonel. We need to debrief. But first," he studied her face. The calm, the stillness. The same quiet strength that had held this woman together through 14 months of invisibility. "Are you all right?" It was a simple question. But from a man like General Marsh, it carried weight. Sarah looked at him. Then, for the first time all day, her expression softened. Just barely. A crack in the armor. The smallest flicker of something human beneath the discipline. "I'm all right, sir," she said, and she meant it. Behind her, the hospital hummed back to life. Machines beeped. Footsteps resumed. Voices returned, low and stunned, and full of questions that would take a very long time to answer. But Sarah Kane did not turn around. She walked forward. Beside General Marsh, toward the sealed doors and the black SUVs and the life she had left behind, the life that had never truly left her, the secret. Medic had finally stepped into the light.